What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Acebeam Defender P17. And I want to start this one off by saying this is probably not an optimal EDC flashlight for most people just due to the size. It's a very purpose-built flashlight, and that purpose is right in the name, Defender. And so what makes a good self-defense flashlight? For me, it's a few things that come to mind. First is quick and easy access to the strobe feature. This probably has the best access to the strobe feature of any of my 50+ lights in my collection. You can access it in milliseconds, and I'll show that in a little bit. I want to make sure to give proper strobe warning, but you can access it in milliseconds, which is a very nice trade from the usual, which is like a quadruple click or hold it for 2+ seconds. And when you're wanting the strobe mode, you want quick access to it. You don't want to have to remember how to get there or wait 2 seconds before you're able to use that strobe, because at that point it may be too late. And so really nice that you have that quick access to the strobe, and it even has a dedicated switch for that when it's in the off mode. That switch does serve another purpose in the on mode, but in the off mode you can just click it and you are ready to go. The next feature that I think is really important in a self-defense flashlight is a high output that's a nice combination of both floody and throwy. And this one has a Cree XHP 70.3 high LED that outputs 4900 lumens in its turbo mode, and it throws for 445 meters. And so you get a nice spillage to light up the area, but also if you need to get someone's attention that's far away, it's going to reach out pretty well and do exactly that. Now, the last feature is the ability to use the light itself for self-defense, and so it has that crenulated bezel for striking, and it's not the most aggressive bezel that I've seen, but it's definitely effective. It's not something you're going to want to feel making contact with your head. And they introduce one other feature into that crenulated bezel, and that's these embedded ceramic balls you can see on 3 of those contact points, and those are actually act as glass breakers. So just kind of another feature where if you need to break some glass, you have that option to easily do so with those that are very non-intrusive. You barely even notice that they're there, but you'll be happy they're there if you end up needing them. Now, a lot of really great features. What's the price point on this? Because it sounds like it's going to be pretty expensive. I think it's actually a pretty medium price point. It's definitely not cheap, but if this is exactly what you're looking for, I do think well worth the price. Cheapest price point I was able to find was $110, and that's through Going Gear, which is actually where I got mine as well. Now, Amazon has the green version only at $110 currently at the time I'm filming this video. The gray and black are both listed at $125 at the moment, and so that does fluctuate on Amazon. I'll link to both in the description. Just make sure to click both those links and check the price at the time you're purchasing, because they do fluctuate. Even Going Gear, they do flashlight exclusive sales sometimes, and so it may end up being cheaper on Going Gear. So definitely important to check, especially if you're watching this in the distant future after it's been filmed. And so back to the flashlight. Let's start with the body of the flashlight. One of the main reasons I wouldn't carry this as an EDC light is because of its size. It's nearly 6 inches long at 5.79 inches in length. The head of this is pretty thick at 1.61 inches in diameter, and even the thinnest point is 1.02 inches in diameter. So it's going to be bulky in your pocket. It's bulky in your hand, which is really nice for its purpose, but a little bit kind of heavy and large for carrying. This is something I'd want to throw in my backpack, throw in the car, or especially if you're walking or hiking at night, just have in hand rather than carrying it in a pocket. Now, it's also pretty weighty. It weighs over a half pound. I weighed it in at 8.23 ounces, and that's with the battery installed. Speaking of battery, it's running a 21700 5100 milliamp lithium ion battery, USB-C rechargeable. This is a spare. It does not come with a spare, but Acebeam does sell them on their website. It does include the USB-C cable as well as additional O-rings, which is great because those will break down. Depending on conditions, it could be 2 to 5 years. Some of them last a little bit longer, but if it's too dry, it's too moist, those will break down a little bit faster. So important to have those O-rings to maintain that dust and waterproof rating. Speaking of which, aluminum body on here, and it has a 1.5 meter drop test, which honestly feels a little bit low. This thing feels like it's built like a tank. I would imagine it could probably survive a little bit more than that. It seems like a conservative estimate, although I haven't tested that out. Now, in terms of the dust and waterproof rating, that's IP68, which equates to 6.5 feet for 30 minutes. So if you just drop this in a puddle or into some shallow water, you can just pick it up. It will be perfectly fine as long as those O-rings are intact. We also have a pocket clip, and it is a two-way pocket clip, but like I said, this is going to be pretty bulky in pants, but manageable, and it's definitely too heavy and too long to put on the bill of the hat and use comfortably. So maybe don't make use of the two-way pocket clip, although you can put it into your pocket the opposite direction if that is your preference. Now, into the lighting modes, I think this has a very intuitive and easy to use operations. And it does have some programmable modes as well from some 3 different preset modes. And so I have it in tactical mode, which I think aligns best with the use case for this flashlight. But I'll talk about what you're adding and what you're losing in the other 2 modes, as well as talk about how to reprogram that if you want to swap it out. But again, I think tactical mode is perfect for the type of light that we have here. And so in terms of operation, we're going to start with the strobe mode. So here's our strobe warning. This is 2000 lumens, ultra bright, and easy to access by clicking that function switch. So this smaller semicircle one is called the function switch. The round one is called our tactical switch. So again, strobe warning, skip ahead 20 seconds here. And so really nice, effective, bright strobe mode. And then we have the tactical switch. That's going to turn it into our regular modes. And so when we click that, it's going to turn it on. You can also semi-press it and not fully depress that button to get your momentary on, but once you click it, you'll get your continuous on. It does have a memory mode, and so I left it in low mode, which is where it turned back on. If I left it in high, that's where it would turn on, obviously. So this low mode, 90 lumens for a day and a half runtime on there. So really nice runtime out of that. And it starts off pretty high. And so if you want that lower mode, that is available in the other modes. But I think for a self-defense or tactical flashlight, this low mode makes perfect sense. It's still really, really bright, but you're not getting that moonlight mode that you're most likely going to skip out on anyway and have to skip over every time you cycle through if you're using it as a tactical light. Now that we have our on mode, this function switch that was previously engaging the strobe light now cycles through the various modes. So if I click that again, we go to medium, that's 580 lumens for 5.5 hours. It does step down to 90 lumens, and that's another 20 minutes. We can click it again to go to our high mode, and now we're getting ultra bright. It's throwing off some heat, 2200 lumens for 6 minutes, steps down to 1250 lumens for an hour and 50 minutes, and then one more step down to 90 lumens for an hour. Last but not least, we have our turbo, and this one is 4900 lumens for 40 seconds, 1250 for an hour and 55 minutes, and then 90 lumens for an hour. This is really throwing off some heat, and the body's starting to get hot as well, so I'm going to cycle back down to our low mode before finally clicking it off. And so that's going to remember that we're in low mode. If you want to leave it in high mode or turbo mode, you can obviously do that as well. Now that turbo mode throws for 445 meters. It's also pretty spilly, so it does light up the area very well. Obviously, we're really close quarters here. The camera is only 2 feet above the table, and my hand is only a few inches away. But it does spill out as it's kind of going further out, which is really nice as well. Now we have access to those other modes. I'm not going to change them just because it's kind of a pain, and it's going to strobe a bunch if I do, because in order to reprogram it, you have to turn on the strobe. And so we have our daily mode, which is exactly the same thing as a tactical mode. It just adds in the ultra low. And I really don't feel like I need that because, again, I feel like I'm always going to be skipping over it for a light like this. If I wanted a moonlight mode or firefly mode, I would use my regular daily carry EDC type flashlight. And so I skip out on the daily mode, but it also has a special mode, which again, I don't really feel like is taking great advantage of the features of this flashlight. The special mode, it could also be called a simple mode. It only has 3 modes: ultra low, low, and then high. So from the other 2 modes, you're losing the turbo, you're losing the medium, and you're losing the strobe. And most of the modes are those lower light modes, which again, if I wanted those, I would probably go with a smaller flashlight that's a little bit more carryable. But to each their own, if that's what you want. It is nice that those features are there, even if I'm not going to be personally taking advantage of them. I also think this is a really good looking flashlight. Not a ton going on, but it does have kind of an appealing look to it. That anodization is starting to wear off, especially around this ring in particular for whatever reason. And I guess that's just where it hits most when it's rolling on the table. But does hold up pretty well, feels extremely durable, like I said when we were talking about that drop test rating, and is just a cool light overall. That $110 is a little bit on the pricey side for what I'd consider like an EDC light, but for a purpose-built light like this, if you're using it for your job, or if you're going out hiking or just walking your dog at night and you want to use it for protection, I do think it's worth spending a little bit of that extra money to get that ultra high quality. Because what you'll find on like Amazon and Alibaba and Temu and all these are lights that are claiming to get this output that are just going to die on you. They're going to be flimsy and cheap. They'll be a lot cheaper, but they're really not going to have the same output and the same build quality that you're getting with this one. So $110 doesn't really seem absurd to me whatsoever. But let me know what you think of this one down in the comments below. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or joining the channel as a member. All help the channel out a ton. And I hope you have a great one. Take care.